Hey everyone, and welcome to my review for the DJi Air 2S. So this is a drone that I've had pretty much from the release date. As soon as it became available, I actually placed the order. I ordered it directly through DJi, so it did take a few more days to arrive than it would normally take for my normal purchases, which are all from Amazon. But as soon as it arrived, I did order the Firmware combo kit. So I did get a few more goodies, including the carrying case, as well as the dock charger, and a few extra blades, as well as a few of the little goodies as well. And I've been pretty much testing it non-stop. I've tried to get a little bit of airtime, if you like, every single day since then, and I think I'm at the stage now where I'm pretty happy to actually make a review in terms of my feelings. This isn't going to be a technical review or anything like that. This is purely my impression as a first-time drone owner. So hopefully some of you guys out there that are maybe looking at a drone, maybe as a first-time owner as well, never having used or owned a drone before, hopefully this will give you an idea in terms of what the experience is like. Okay, so I do have a list of things that I've made in terms of positives as well as negatives, and there's one or two suggestions in there as well. So what we'll do is we'll start with the good, then we'll move on to the bad, and then we'll get down to the suggestions. So first thing is the picture quality. So the picture quality out of this 1-inch sensor camera is pretty incredible. I was absolutely blown away by some of the footage that you can actually capture, and bear in mind that so far I've never actually applied any of the ND filters either. Just because of how I've been using it, I've just been getting in the odd few minutes here and there in terms of airtime whenever I was able to, and I've been very busy the last few weeks with work and other things as well. So for that reason, I've not really had a lot of time in terms of messing around with the technical side of things, especially when it comes to the camera side. So I've left everything in auto. I've done it as a new drone owner would do. So when you first get a drone, the most important thing to master initially is the controls. You can worry about cinematic footage and everything like that afterwards, but initially what you want to make sure you get right is being able to control the drone, getting used to the controls, and also just learning some of the little tips and tricks on it as well. I've benefited by watching a few other YouTubers, mainly channels that have basically had drones for a lot longer, and their channels are normally dedicated to drones, because what they'll do is they'll give you all those little nuances that you only pick up over time, and you only pick up once you've had a few different drones and you actually know what to look for in terms of the differences. So the picture quality is pretty amazing, and what I'll do is throughout this video I'll have inlays of some b-roll and some montages that I've actually shot. I've not actually got any really spectacular footage just yet, unfortunately, because once again of time constraints. I've not actually been able to go out anywhere and actually get some really nice cinematic footage, but as I say, all of my experience so far has literally been more as a hobbyist, so more in terms of getting used to the drone and just learning what I can do with it and what the limits are essentially. So the picture quality, so you do have HLG as well as D-Log. Now I have done a few shots in D-Log, but as most of you know, anybody who's subscribed to my channel will know that I actually prefer working with HLG, just because I drop it onto my HLG timeline and it just works perfectly. So for me, the HLG just looks spectacular, really rich, really vibrant. You don't need to do much to it, but it does give you a little leeway. The D-Log footage, from what I've tested, and there's only been a few clips here and there that I've actually tested it with, it has a lot of room that you can actually maneuver the footage with. So the D-Log, for those out there, once you get to the level where you want to actually work with creating cinematic footage, then yeah, that's going to be great. But for me personally, the ease of use when it comes to the D-Log footage is just brilliant. So that's something that I really love. So in terms of the D-Log footage, it is very easy to literally just drop a LUT on your Final Cut Pro file, and it will instantly get it to a point where it's almost perfect, and then you can obviously manipulate it from there. But that's what log footage gives you essentially. The next sort of positive thing that I want to comment on is the ease of use. So being brand new to drones, this is something that I picked up very easily. I suppose it probably helps if you played a lot of video games in the past, because you'll be used to this sort of thumbstick style controller, if you like. But it's not like I've flown sims or anything before, so simulators, flight simulators, anything like that. So for me, it was brand new experience. It was a little daunting to start with, but it has a lot of safety features built in. A couple of them I'll touch on a little later in a separate video, just in terms of making sure you do certain checks before you actually take off. But yeah, there's a lot of, obviously, as you can see, you've got sensors pretty much everywhere on this drone, top, bottom. The only part where it's missing them is the side, and we'll touch on that a little later on. But yeah, ease of use is really, really good. And I think DJi are probably the best in terms of the market, in terms of creating products where it's going into a completely new sort of area, such as drones, such as gimbals, things like that, where normally they're quite daunting, and they make it very, very easy for you to actually learn it and also pick up and get better at it very quickly as well. Okay, so the next sort of positive thing that I want to touch on is this dock controller, and this is a kind of strange one because it's something that I'd never really thought of previously, and initially I actually thought it was broken. But what this charger does is it prioritizes whichever battery has the most charge already. So for example, when you first get the drone, you're recommended to basically charge everything up, so your controller and all 3 batteries if you get the Filenames combo kit. Now what I did was, initially when I threw everything on, I noticed that certain lights will come on, and then if I just press the button on the remote, you'll see it. So you get a little flashing LED, and it tells you roughly sort of the amount of juice that's left in there by the 4 dots that are on it. And then what I noticed was when I came back to it maybe about 10-15 minutes later, only one of the batteries was charging. And the reason for that is what it's doing is it's prioritizing whichever battery has the most charge, so then you can get up in the air faster. So for example, if you had 3 batteries and they were all on 50, 40 and 30%, it would then trickle charge all of those at the same rate. So yeah, you'd end up with 3 fully charged batteries, but you'd have a much longer downtime. Whereas what this tends to do is it prioritizes whichever battery has the most charge. So it will then get that battery to 100% as fast as possible, and then it will go on to the next one. So you can take the one that's on 100% and you can throw it back on the camera or the drone and get back up in the air again. In terms of battery life of the controller, this I've only ever had to charge it once. It lasts a very, very long time, and what I did find was even when I had smartphone charging enabled, so it actually keeps your phone topped up at the same time, it was still going strong. So as I say, I've only had to, apart from the initial charge, I've only had to charge this once, and that was when I was actually going out the following day, and I knew that I wanted everything fully topped up. So I did charge all 3 batteries as well as the controller. Battery life in terms of the 3 batteries and the controller is flawless. You're not going to have any problems with battery life with the controller. The batteries themselves, obviously it depends on what you're using it for, whether you're recording 4K, whether it's really windy, how high up you're going, how far you're going, all those kind of variants. So that will vary, but generally I think there are quite a few people that have done actual battery tests, but I tend to get between say 20 and 30 minutes worth of flight time. I don't think I ever got it to 30 because I never run it down that low. So generally whenever I get to roughly around 10% battery remaining, I'll bring it back home even if it's pretty close, and I'll just land it manually. So battery life, and I think that's probably because I'm still new to the drone and I'm not taking any chances. I've seen a few horror stories on YouTube already of people that have flown their drone out over the sea, and basically because of the winds and everything, they weren't able to get it back, and then they've lost the drone as a result of it. Okay, so the other thing that I just wanted to comment on, I don't know where I've actually put it inside this bag, but you do also get a little adapter that you can actually plug into the batteries themselves, and what that does then is it also creates that into a power bank as well, essentially. So you have a little USB port on it, and then you can just plug that into whatever you want to charge up. As I say, because of the fact that generally I'm using the 12 Pro Max, so the battery life is pretty amazing on that anyway, and then I've also got it plugged into the DJi controller, and I've got charging enabled. I've not really had any issues with regards to needing to use the batteries as an additional power bank, but it's nice that you have that option there. I personally haven't actually run into the issue where I've needed to actually charge these out on the go. I know a few people have commented that rather than the power bank adapter or maybe one of the other accessories, they would have preferred to have gotten the car charger, so then you can actually charge everything up when you're out and about. I think that's probably more beneficial for people that are doing things like camping or anything where they're away from a power source for quite a long time. Me personally, I found that especially with the drone, I can get enough footage through 3 full batteries, so I didn't really need to charge them on the go. But I do understand where they're coming from, where if you did have that option where you could actually just charge each battery up as you were using it, then it'd mean that you could get a lot more footage. And for those that are just going solely out to get decent footage, then obviously that means it's a lot more usable for them. Okay, so now coming on to the negatives, and unlike the Insta360 video, most of these are literally going to be little nitpicky kind of things, so they're not anything that would make me think that, yeah, I want to send this back, or I'm not happy with the device. I love the drone. It's just that there is no perfect product out there, so I'm going to highlight the things that I think that DJi need to work on, both through hardware or software, mostly software to be fair. So the first of those is firmware updates. So when you first connect everything up and you open up the DJi app, you will get prompted to basically update all your firmware. Now what I did when I initially set it up was I did that on the device whilst I was inside on Wi-Fi, and then I went into the settings and I actually checked to see if there was any more updates. None were showing, so I went out, had a quick flight, brought it back inside, and then swapped the batteries over. When I connected the second battery, it actually prompted me to do another update, and it repeated this process for the next 3 times that I actually swapped over the batteries. So now I'm not sure whether it does individual updates for each battery, but it was strange that it didn't allow me to do the updates all at once, even though I did actually remove each battery and try it when I initially updated the camera as well, because I had seen videos where some people had commented on the fact that you do need to do battery updates as well as drone and controller updates. So it was just kind of a bit scattered in terms of how it actually presents the updates. One of them actually came the day after I'd used it for the initial use. So the updates, it can be a little bit annoying, because if you do ever get to that point where you're not in the mindset where you're checking the drone before you're going out, because generally what I tend to do is you have your carrying bag, you can get 3 batteries in there, your controller's charged up, you just leave everything in there. That way, whenever you need to go out and do some filming, you know that you've got enough juice there, you've got enough battery power to last you the full day. So I was just lucky that I have a very decent data plan, so I was able to do that update. Otherwise, for some people, they might end up getting stuck, especially if you go to an area where there is no cell service, so you're going to end up not being able to do the update and not being able to fly. Okay, so coming on to the next issue, and that's probably the biggest problem that I've had with the drone, and possibly I thought it may have even been a fault, and that was to do with the range. So because initially when I was flying it, I was doing it around a sort of residential area, because I didn't really have the time to go out and about and get some really open area footage filmed. I was doing everything line in sight, so I was sending the drone higher, but I was only literally getting maybe 200 to 300, maybe not that low. I think the max I was getting was 400 meters range, which compared to the 12 kilometers stated was obviously pretty low. Over last weekend, I did manage to get out to an area where it's a little bit more open, so there's not as many areas of interference, so there's not houses with Wi-Fi and everything like that. And in that area, basically what I did manage to do was get, I think it was roughly around 2,000 feet range that I was able to get to, but even that is still well short of the 12 kilometers. So potentially I'm not 100% sure if I've got a sort of dodgy or faulty drone in terms of the signal, because what I also noticed was it takes a very long time to actually pick up any type of GPS. So even though you get that 31 minutes of stated flight time, because it takes so long for you to initially get your satellite connections up and running, you end up losing quite a bit of that. So you end up averaging roughly around 20 to 25 minutes worth of flight time. And then obviously that's where you're kind of still figuring out where you want to fly, what path you want to do, whether you want to do any of your other type of shots as well, your quick shots, your master shots, all that kind of stuff. So the range initially was kind of troubling. I wasn't really sure what to do in terms of the app. I tried changing some of the settings in the app from dual band to just either 2.4 or 5.8 gigahertz bands, but it didn't really make any difference. So I think that's just a case of my area being so condensed with Wi-Fi signals that it's just not going to be that great. But from what I've seen in more open areas, it does seem a little better. I understand that the 12 kilometers is best scenario and that's line of sight, so that's not going to be something that you get all the time, but it would have been nice to have been able to get a little bit more range just in the areas where I'm going to be using it mostly. Okay, so coming on to the next sort of issue, and that's the fact that you can't do any type of tracking in what's considered high frame rates. So that includes 5K, and that includes anything 4K 30 frames per second upwards. So if you do 50, 60, whatever options it gives you, you can't then do any type of tracking, not just master shots or quick shots. You can't even do your normal tracking. So that was kind of disappointing, because one of the main things that I wanted this for was the 5K video, and being able to capture that for moving shots of cars and things like that. So that was a little disappointing. It's not the end of the world, because 4K 30 is still incredibly sharp, which you'll see from some of the shots that I actually inlay, but it would be nice if through firmware updates, because I'm sure this is something that they should be able to fix through firmware, if they enable high frame rate tracking as well as 5K 30, because 5K 30 essentially isn't high frame rate. I understand that they're using the full sensor when they're doing that, but even still, I'd prefer it if we can get some either 4K 60, give us 4K 60, because that way you can do a slow-mo a lot easier, or give us 5K so then we can shoot it initially in a much higher resolution, and then we can crop in or do whatever we need to do. Okay, so the next one actually relates to the controller. And for those of you who've never seen a drone before, the controllers for the DJIs, they're literally just stored in the bottom there. So I really like that solution, that they're on the remote all the time, because the bag that they actually come with, you can't store it in the bag with the thumbsticks enabled. Now, one of the things, the next sort of big issue was the fact that these are way too sensitive. So some people that have actually had previous drones have already commented that the Cine mode, and it's got 3 modes, so it's got Cine, it's got standard, and yeah, normal, and then it's got sport. Now, because I'm still new to this, and because of the use case that I've got it for, I'm generally using it in Cine mode, but it's still way too fast when it comes to panning and moving around. Now, I did go into the settings and actually change some of the settings, and I put everything down to the minimum. But the strange bug that I encountered was that whenever I do that, so whenever I turn everything all the way down, it doesn't update until the next time that I actually use the drone. So I have to actually effectively turn it all off, disconnect the app, kill the app, and then the next time I actually used it, it actually kicked in. So when I initially went in and updated everything, I was using the drone, I landed it because it was too sensitive, made a few changes and sent it back up, and it was pretty much exactly how it was. So first I thought it was just broken. I thought that function just wasn't even working correctly. But then the next time I went out to use the drone, I actually noticed that all of the movements were a lot smoother, a lot slower. It's still kind of difficult to get your camera movements to be really steady, but as I say, it's one of those things where I don't know whether it's a bug in the app, I don't know whether it's a bug with my unit, whether it's the drone, the controller, or what, but basically I did find that it doesn't update the same time you're using it. It needs you to actually shut everything down. This is what I'm taking from it anyway, because that's the only way that I know it actually worked, where once everything shut down and I booted it back up again, then the movements were actually a lot slower, but then they were actually too slow at that point, so I needed to adjust them. But essentially, it would have been nice if your standard sort of Cine setting, so the one that comes out of the box, is a lot slower, because generally if you're in Cine mode, then that's what you want. You don't want it completely slow to the point where it's not even moving, but you want it a little slower, so then you can actually control those movements and get a little better footage from it. Okay, so coming on to the next one, and this is purely software, and this is something that's quite annoying in the sense that what it does is occasionally when you're flying, you'll drop frames whenever your connections weakens, and what I found was every single time it does that, but also sometimes just randomly as well, it'll cut the clip that you're recording. So generally what I do is I'll send the drone up and I'll record one long clip, so then I've got all the footage, and then I bring it back and I can snip that and make the edits I want. But what tends to happen is randomly, and it's not any set period, it's not any sort of file size, it'll randomly just cut bits from the video and it'll put them into a new video. So rather than having one long video for one single shot, it'll actually split them into loads of small segments. And up till now I haven't been able to actually verify whether it's missing any bits. So it does obviously start a new clip, but I'm not 100% sure that it's actually not losing some frames in between. Now, generally it's not going to be the end of the world even if it does lose a few frames, unless this is a sort of one opportunity. I'll give you an example. So if you were to go out and film a car, you're panning around a car and you've only got one sort of shot at that, and then if it was to cut halfway through that, yeah, you could join those two clips together. But if the frames aren't carrying on straight away, so if there are some drops frames, then you're going to have a very sharp movement, sort of like a cut essentially, and that's something that you wouldn't really be able to recover in post. So that's something that is a little annoying, the fact that it makes it harder for you to even sync everything up, because obviously there's no audio, so syncing this up with any other video means that you have to do it manually, and when you then have multiple clips to sync up, it's just making it more difficult. That's something that I'm hoping is just a software bug, and that they can actually fix that by combining all those clips into one long clip rather than doing loads of separate clips. Okay, the other one is something kind of strange. So I never really thought about this initially until somebody else actually mentioned it on one of their videos, and that's the fact that it does actually heat up quite a lot, and the fans kick on pretty much instantly. So if I just turn it on, and it will do its little jig and dance, and the camera will rotate, and you'll instantly be able to hear that the fans have kicked on. It just seems kind of strange that the fans would kick on straight away even when it's not flying. I'm not sure whether this has been an issue on any previous drones, whether they've actually had any issues with overheating, and obviously if you do have overheating, generally the one thing that always affects is your battery life. So that's one of those things where the flight time on drones generally isn't going to be amazing anyway. In terms of flight time for this, it's not bad, but from the quoted 31 minutes, if the fans are kicking in straight away and everything's heating up, then it's probably going to reduce down straight away because of that. And obviously in the long term as well, you'll also get premature wear on the battery, and that could possibly lead to some performance issues further down the line, where I have seen where if the voltages drop down below a certain point, it won't actually allow you to do certain shots, it won't allow you to get certain speeds, probably won't allow you to come back if you were to fly it really out really far. So that's something that is kind of strange, not necessarily a negative point or anything, that's just something that I wanted to mention. Okay, and the last one of the negatives, and this is something being really nitpicky, and this is just purely down to my workflow, and that is whenever you make a video with this, what it does is it names the file something like DJi, and then it has a number, but it always restarts that number at 00101. Which means that if you format the card every single time you use it, which I tend to like to do with these kind of things, just so then I've cleared all the footage and I've got maximum space available, whenever you copy that stuff back into onto your hard drive on your laptop or your MacBook, whatever, it wants to overwrite the previous footage. So what I tend to do is whenever I'm filming anything, I back everything up to my NAS drive and I separate them into months. So whenever I'm going out and I'm flying new footage with this and I'm dropping into April 2021 folder, the first thing it's always going to do is ask me whether I want to overwrite anything, because it's got the same file name, and that just makes it more difficult when it comes to storing footage but also finding footage as well, and also it makes it a little bit more difficult when it comes to Final Cut Pro and working with footage like that. I end up having to rename files. So as I say, extremely nitpicky, but it would be a much better idea, rather than having just a standard number, to use the time code. So have it DJi at the start and then use the date and time as the sort of file name. That way you never have to worry about renaming files or overwriting anything by mistake. And what it'll also do is it'll actually make it a lot easier in terms of sorting the footage, because you can literally just drop it in that folder and then just sort by date. And normally most of those kind of apps can figure out that those sort of numbers in there are a date, and it'll actually put them in the right order, as it does with my A7S3 footage. So all of the A7S3 footage that I record, it's coded with the date and time. So that means that I never have to worry about renaming files. I can literally just drop them into any folder and it'll actually organize everything for me. So that's something, as I say, is really nitpicky, but it's one of those things, it's a suggestion that I think DJi could very easily add into the app, and it'll make everybody's life who works with this footage in this way a lot easier. Okay, I'm coming on to the sort of last suggestion that I have, and that is something that I actually remember from the gimbal. So I actually have a DJi gimbal, and one of the most basic things on gimbals is A to B. By that, what I mean is when you're shooting in 5K, and you have master shots and you have quick shots and you have all the other tracking modes, but it doesn't necessarily have anything for just a very simple A to B movement. So by that I mean I set the drone so it starts here and then it will come around and it'll finish there, and it will just keep its focus on whatever object I select, and it's a pre-programmed move. So that's the important thing, where I don't need to do anything with it. I just set a start point, an end point, and then I hit go and it'll just do it itself. Now I know, yes, you can do that with quick shots and master shots and a few other methods where you just draw and track an item, but none of those are available when you're using 5K, and none of them are available at 4K 60. So that's something where it's a much simpler shot. It's not as complicated as some of the quick shots, and it's definitely not as complicated as setting all your heights and your distances for master shots. I will do a separate video on quick shots and master shots because I've not played about with them enough yet, but needless to say, as everybody else has mentioned, I absolutely love how they work when they're working. I have had a few little niggles, which, as I say, I'll mention in a separate video because they're more to do with those particular modes as opposed to the drone in general. But yeah, that was the last sort of suggestion, where it'd make it a lot easier in terms of content creation if they just add a simple start and end point, or an A to B mode as I like to call it. You don't necessarily need to have A to B to C, because that then goes into the territory of quick shots and master shots, but a simple A to B mode would be really helpful. Okay, so that's my review for the DJi Air 2S. As most of you have probably gathered by now, it's a lot more positive and a lot better than the Insta360 review that I actually did. It's one of those products that I was always kind of worried about investing this much money into a drone in the past, because I was never really that confident that the software that was built in would be good enough to where you wouldn't end up losing a £1,000 drone. It's not perfect, and as others have mentioned, obviously the fact that there's no side sensors means that they're intentionally not encroaching onto the Pro market, the Mavic Pro market, which will no doubt have the side sensors. The camera is a massive improvement over what I've seen from other drones, because mainly for me personally, I work with 10-bit footage. I wasn't wanting to buy an 8-bit drone, which is another reason why a lot of the features aren't working for me, because they're such as the zoom mode. I've not really mentioned the zoom because I've not used it, because the zoom only works in standard mode. DJi, you guys really need to sort that, get it available in HLG and D-Log, and then that will become a lot more useful. But for me personally, I'm never shooting in standard mode. It's always either HLG or D-Log, and for that reason the zoom is pretty much non-existent. It's not available. So until it's available, I'm not really going to make a comment on it because I'm not using it. The other thing that I've not really touched on, but I'll just quickly go over, is the photo quality. So I didn't buy this for photos at all. It was only for video footage. I did test it out and the photos are very good. I think the photos will benefit more from the NDs, simply because the shutter speed and everything can be adjusted automatically in terms of getting you reasonable footage from all the test samples that I've done so far. But for the photos, I think generally because you're capturing directly into the light on most occasions in order to get the most dynamic photos, I think that's where the ND tests will probably be a lot more useful. But it's one of those things where generally I'm always shooting video, even with my Sony, and even with iPhones, everything. Generally, if I have the option of photos or videos, I'm always going to go for video. So I have tested it. It is pretty good. It does produce very good photos even without the ND filters, so no doubt with the ND filters installed and more manual control, it will be even better. Anyway, that's it for this video. If you haven't already done so, please do subscribe to the channel. Also hit the bell icon, that way you're notified whenever I upload any new videos. I will have more videos coming on the Air 2S. As I say, because I've been so busy, I've not had a chance to upload too many. I was basically just wanted to test it out as much as possible. I'd really appreciate if you give this video a thumbs up, that way more people can actually see it and benefit from it. If you do have any comments or questions, drop them down in the comment section below. I'll do my best to answer all comments that I actually receive. And other than that, thanks very much for watching.